Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Unscripted. I'm Marshall Brown. This is Brandon Dodd. I'm glad to have you guys with us. We are talking today about prayer, about connecting with God. And honestly, it's a question that has been asked multiple times to both you and I, both by Christians and non-Christians, asking like, what happens when we pray? Is there a God who actually listens to our prayers? How do I know that he's listening to my prayers? How do I know that he's providing the answers that I'm looking for? It's really kind of is there a God that really wants to hear my prayers? Is there a God that really wants to pay attention to what it is I have to say? And if so, how do I know that? Right?
Yeah, because I think that, like you said, we're talking with Christians about prayer and everything. I heard somebody say in a sermon that I was listening to a couple weeks ago, he said that in times of war, like whenever you're in the trenches and fighting a battle, there's no atheists. I was
Right.
like, what? And he was like, yeah, because you're down in there and bombs are going off and everything, and everybody is praying, whether you believe in God or not. Everybody's praying because there's something deep and like out of our desperation. And all humans are kind of like, have moments of out of our desperation, we pray these prayers. And so whether or not you believe in God or not, it's like in these moments of, just turmoil in my life, I don't even know if this works, but I'm going to try because you're trying everything. Yeah. And so the question I feel like that you and I are trying to really look at is like, does God care about us? Is he even listening to us? That's what one of the psalmists said of like, who am I? I am but a man, and you listen to me. And like, this is me, honestly, I feel like he shouldn't listen to us.
Yeah.
I don't know, because there's other pressing things in the world. So like, why would he concern himself with our little meaningless prayers?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the question that we don't necessarily want to answer, but we want to at least have a response to. Of like, so I think today, it's like, does God, because regardless of the prayer, does God even care about, I was talking with the teenagers last week, does God care about your stupid problems?
Yeah.
Or your boring life? Does God care about your boring life?
Yeah. But I think, it's a legitimate question. It's a valid question. I think that, here, let me interrupt myself like 3 times. We're operating under the assumption that there is a God, first of all. So, if you're watching this podcast and you're thinking like, wondering about prayer and stuff, what we're going to be talking about, and I guess how we're kind of responding to that question, we're operating under the assumption that, yes, we believe there is a God. So if that's not something that you believe in, that's a topic for another time. So for this discussion, let's just assume that there is a God who has created everything, who has created us, and he's real, and he's operating in the universe in some form or fashion. So let's just assume that we all agree on that. Now, having said that, to your point, why would an all-powerful God care about just this one person on earth who has something that's really important to them, but not necessarily important to everybody else in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah. I think it's a question that, with the assumption that there is an all-knowing God that can listen to me at any time, which is the cool part about our God, is that if everybody that's listening right now to the podcast, or you and I both were to start praying and pray individual prayers, God is spending equal attention just with you and I on the people listening to the podcast.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, I'm not saying the movie influenced this, but I think it points to something that a lot of us believe about God. You remember the movie Bruce Almighty with Jim Carrey?
Yeah. Classic.
Where he's given, God's powers, and like he all of a sudden starts hearing just this flood of voices. And he's like, what is that? And he starts talking real loud, and nobody else can hear it but him. And then he talks to God. He's like, what's all the voices in my head? And God's like, yeah, those are prayers. You need to do something about that, or it's going to keep getting louder. And he's like, that's the whole world praying? It's like, no. And it's like just like a city block. It's like this many people. And he's like, oh my gosh. And I think that whether we actually think that's the way it happens, I think that kind of just how big our world is, with how many people there are in the world, with how much stuff there is going on in the world, why would God pay attention to me and my prayer to, I don't know, win the lottery or ace this test or, whatever else, find somebody to date or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the question.
And that's the question that we're trying to answer right now is like, does that all-powerful, all-knowing God who can hear all prayers, is he actually tuned into my prayers? And does he actually care about the things that I care about?
Yeah. And I think that's where we can each kind of come into it personally of, I know whenever I'm driving, I'll get frustrated or, you get an email that ruins your day or things like that. And it's like, well, I kind of only want to do like emergency hatch prayers. It's like when the fire alarm's going off, like that's when I'm going to pray because God's going to hear me now.
Right.
Or like, maybe I feel like that's, the life of many people is that, man, really the only time that I pray is whenever I'm in that desperation. And so does God really care about like, what's a meaningless quote unquote, what's a meaningless prayer that you've prayed recently?
Oh, recently?
I'm just tell something that it really is meaningless in the long run, but you prayed about it nonetheless.
Well, let's see, what's meaningless? That my kids would do really well on the exams that they were taking.
Right. And
I have specifically prayed for that. God,
yes.
Please let them do well.
So is it meaningful to you?
Somewhat, but it's not even like, it's not one of those things I'm praying like, God, I want them to have really good grades so that I can feel good about myself as a parent or whatever. It's like, I want them not even to be able to brag about their grade, but just feel good about themselves. And like, I want them to feel successful. Yeah. So please let this happen.
Yeah. And if it's even more specific, you said this test, this exam.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why would God care about that?
Right. Exactly.
There's no need for God to care about those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And cause I'm thinking, I mean, it's dumb things of like, I'm really frustrated and just like, God, help me deal with this right now. Or like, God, why is it raining? Like it didn't have to rain today.
Yeah.
Or, I got this, text. I'm just making it up. I get this text that kind of, puts me off in the day. And like, I feel kind of lame being like, God, like, it's not a big deal, but like, it's bothering me in the context of the things that are happening in the Middle East. The fact that if God is running the world and he's spinning it on its axis and he's making it happen, he made the eclipse happen, which is like, oh, look at all this glory and goodness that we just get to like, whoa, the natural world that God has given us is amazing. And God, I'm bugging God about a single test.
Yeah.
Or why am I so frustrated that this light is red when I need to keep going?
Can I quote another movie?
Go for it.
So, For Love of the Game with Kevin Costner. You ever seen it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's like he's on the pitcher's mound towards the end of the movie, and he's like, he starts praying while he's on the pitcher's mound, and he says, God, I know I always said I'd never bother you about a baseball game. Seems like you got a whole lot of other stuff going on in the world.
Yeah.
But if you could make this pain in my shoulder go away for 10 more minutes, and I think again, there's almost a little bit of guilt on our part sometimes. Like, I think I'm bothering God. Yeah. Am I bothering God? I don't want to bother. And so I guess that's the question. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that God is bothered by that kind of stuff?
Well, think about this. You've had young kids before. Now they're older and don't ask near as many questions. But I have my kiddos. Yeah, I have kiddos asking me it feels like thousands of questions. Yeah. All day long. And I'll sometimes I care. Mm-hmm. I pray that I care more. God, to hear my prayer right now that I care more.
But it's not 100%.
But oh no. And I want to be a good Christian father, and I want to be just a good father in general, and I want to raise up these kiddos to love Christ and to love others and all those things. Yeah. There's sometimes I'm like, man, I got other stuff I'm doing right now. Mm-hmm. And I dismiss their questions. And I'm trying to be a good father. What's cool is that I think that that's our perception of the way that we talk to God, of like, there are other things. I've seen that in multiple movies, by the way, of just like, I can't think of them right now, but I know you got other things going on, God, but just for 10 minutes, let me have this moment, or something. And I feel like all of us, like, we have to like, God, I'm sorry that I'm coming up to you, but here's my thing. And here's the deal is that like, God is in a different category of father than we are.
Right.
He's also in a different category of being. And so if he really is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omnipotent, omniscient,
omnipotent. That's
those
omniscient.
things. So he's everywhere always,
Mm-hmm.
and he knows all of the things, so he's not wearied by any of those things.
And he's all powerful.
And he's all powerful to where he can actually do something about those things.
Yeah.
Then God is not burdened by our incessant questions.
Yeah.
Because he's a good father. Something that I thought that was really cool that we were walking through with the teenagers not that long ago. There's this verse in Psalms, and it's a prayer of David, and he's praying. Man, this one psalm I feel like is really good. It's Psalm 139, which I know that you were probably thinking of some verses, but there's this verse in Psalm 139, verse 17 and 18, and I've just got it right here to make sure that I say it correctly. It says this: "How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. And if I could count these thoughts, they are more than the sand. I awake and I'm still with you." The Hebrew for some of those actually gets a little bit more intense. It says, "How precious to me are your thoughts concerning me."
Oh, yeah.
Oh God. So it's not just, I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
God has infinitely more thoughts in a category outside of his own. But he says, "How precious to me are your thoughts concerning me."
Yeah, about me.
And it's David. So not just are your thoughts about humanity, because of course he would think about humanity, but concerning me.
Yeah.
And then not only are they precious, he quantifies them. He said, if I could count them, they are more than the sand.
Mm-hmm.
They're more than the sand. And so to me, this was just mind blowing. I was listening to another guy who's doing more research about this particular verse. And he was like, so in a 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot, so cubic foot of sand, how many grains of sand?
I would say 100 billion.
Oh, that's really good. It's a little bit less than that.
Oh, okay.
500 million. That's the estimation. 500 million.
Okay.
Which still is like, okay. And that's a 1 cubic foot.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to the beach, which I know you have, I'm like, okay, well, how many grains of sand are there? And then how many grains of sand are at the bottom of the ocean? Yeah. And then at the dunes that are behind you, not to mention the like deserts, like the actual deserts, and then the sand traps.
And the golf course.
Okay. We need to quantify those two.
Yeah.
And David's not trying to be like, that's exactly the number. It's supposed to be like, there's no way that you could quantify the amount that God thinks about you. And Marshall, what are the things that you think about? I think about the things that I care about, the things that I love. I think about my family a ton. I think about my sons and my daughter and my wife. I think about my job. I think about relationships, and I think about those things a ton. And it's because those things are important and they have value to me. And so here's how much that God loves us and cares about us. So to come to the prayer portion of like, of course God has time for you. Mm-hmm. He thinks about you more than we can quantify.
Yeah.
And so anytime that we're like, hey God, he's like, yes. Like, well, what's up? What do you need? Yeah. Like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Right. Okay. So here's my question for you. Why does God even care though? Like, why? Like, I'm not dismissing what you just said, because it's incredible to think that the God of the universe, the creator of the universe, not only thinks about me, but thinks specifically about the things that are important to me, or maybe even the things that aren't necessarily what I'm passionate about, but I probably should be concerned about. Yeah. Like, he's concerned about those things for me ahead of time, Yeah. So that's awesome. But why is that? Why would that infinitely powerful God be that concerned about me?
And that's what David said.
And that's, I think that goes back to our question as well that gets asked. Like, okay, let's say there is a God. Why would he care about me? There's so many people, I don't want to get too negative, but there's so many people who don't care about me.
Yeah.
Like,
there's lots of people that don't
It's not like I'm the most important person in the world. Yeah. So there's a lot of people that don't even know who I am or what's going on in my life or know anything about me, even know that I exist. But he does. Yeah. And not only is he aware of my existence, but he's concerned about it. Why is that?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it goes back to it's in Psalm 139 again. Not to I'm using the Bible to justify what I say about God and everything too. But man, I think he shouldn't. Like, he shouldn't care about us. And I don't mean that on like the, oh, whoa, like, well, why shouldn't he? Well,
Yeah.
because I think I'm messed up. I don't know about you. I think I'm unlikable.
I think you're messed up too.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. That's on the podcast, right? We got that down. Yeah, but just
no, we're both full of flaws and mistakes.
And to your point, there's people that love you, and there's people that don't care about you, and there's people that dislike you. And the same thing with me as well. And I think that's true for human existence. So why would this being that's in charge of everything concern himself with a peon like me?
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to the father thing that we were talking about, in that we're not, I mean, think if we were created by aliens, or some of the aliens come down, like that is a different relationship. The relationship that the Bible shares with us about who God is that God ultimately is our Father. Whenever Jesus is teaching his disciples to pray, he's like, whenever you pray like this: our Father, like not my Father. I'm praying to somebody else's Father, but our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. There's something special and particular about this Father. And if he's our Father and we're his children, well, number one, how much do you love your kids? You love your kids.
I mean, infinitely.
And an unquantifiable amount.
It's unconditional.
And he loves us because he's our Father, because he has created us. And going back to the verses that you and I were kind of just talking about, it says in verse 13 of Psalm 139, you formed my inward parts. Like he's the one that knitted me together in my mother's womb. And God, I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. And my frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven. And the words here, I mean, it's like God's placing each molecule.
Yeah.
Like that's so cool.
Yeah.
And not even just physically, but like emotionally and intelligent and spiritually, God is doing that kind of thing. So do you think it's because, I'll shoot the question back at you. Do you think it's because he made us as this masterpiece, as Ephesians would say, Ephesians 2:10, that we're this masterpiece, that we're his children, that he like pieced these lumps of molecules together, and that's why he cares about it?
I mean, I think that's part of it. I mean, you think about sculptors and stuff, going back to even like Michelangelo and stuff like that. They put so much time and effort into just chiseling and carving and buffing out like all the flaws and everything. Like there's a very personal relationship that you have with something that you actually make.
Yeah.
And I can think about that just even like home projects. Like if I have somebody come do the work versus if I do the work, there's so much more pride that I have. Like I did that, even if it's like the most simple thing and people are like, really? Like, yeah, I had to watch 5 different YouTube videos on that and get some advice from other people, but I did it. And that I'm protective of that now. Don't mess that up. Yeah. I built that, So I think that has something to do with it. My other thing, the reason I think that God cares so much is because God craves connection. This is part of the reason that he made us in the first place, is not so that he could just make something and go, okay, now let me set these little minions out here and I get to watch and play with them like little toys. And if that's people's concept of God, that's completely misguided, because
it's not what Scripture paints as.
That's what I was going to say. Like in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, there's a story of Paul talking to a bunch of people who don't know anything about God. They have an awareness or a belief that there is something in control. Of course, they had like a whole bunch of different guys to choose from. But they believed that there was something beyond like our dimension that was in control and that was making things happen. And so Paul's like, well, let me tell you what I think about that. And so he starts talking about God. And before he even talks about Jesus, he's just talking about God. And he talks about how God like created the heavens and the earth and all of us. But then he specifically says, this is in Acts chapter 17, he specifically says, the reason that God did that, the reason that God created the heavens and the earth, and the reason that God knit you together and handcrafted you was so that you would reach out for him. And he's not that far away. He's just right there.
Love it.
And so what is Paul ultimately saying? God craves connection, and he created us to be in a relationship with him and to be connected with him. All of us. Yeah. So along with what you were just saying about being like this wonderfully handmade creation of God. Of course, I'm concerned about my handcrafted creation. But then the other part of that is if part of my DNA is to be in a relationship and to be connected with someone, especially something I put that much time and effort and energy and thought into, like I crave that. So of course I want to know what's on your heart. I want you to connect with me. Yeah. I want you to reach out for me. That's why I made you in the first place, so that we could reach out and grab onto each other and be connected with each other.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you a personal question?
Okay.
And I don't mean to make this weird or whatever, but like, did you?
But it's gonna be.
Yeah. Did you and Christy talk about kids before getting married and everything?
A little bit, like
what I'm assuming, like a yes or no thing of like, yeah.
You want to have kids? Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I think that's probably about it. Yeah.
Okay. Was there? Because I'm thinking about myself, because you just have my cogs turning. Of why? Just why have kids?
Yeah, I'm not even for sure. It's just like, okay, I think we're supposed to. I don't know. Like, I didn't think about like, I want to create a little human and make them like me. And
he would be my minion.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. It was like, yeah, you're supposed to have kids. I didn't put
so is that of obligation?
Almost out of obligation. Yeah, I get. No, it's not obligation, but it's just almost like, yeah, I think I want that. I think I do want to raise kids. I do want to have that connection with and be a mentor of some kind. And, you know, although I think the parenting role is a little bit different than that, but that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was something that even subconsciously I was looking forward to.
Yeah.
But I think that's a conscious decision on God's part.
Yeah.
I want to be connected to you. So when people ask the question, does God even care about what it is that I pray for? Absolutely. He made you, and he made you for a relationship with him. So then I think we can take that even a step further. Okay. And going back to even the parenting thing, you talked about like all the questions your kids asked and how overwhelming those things are. And I remember those days as well. I don't get asked as many questions now. As a matter of fact, when my kids do ask questions now, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're asking me a question. They want to know my opinion. Yeah. But even with that, what if you get to the point where your kids where they don't want to ask you questions, where they don't even want to come to you and even ask? How are you going to react to that as a dad?
It hasn't happened yet because they want to
right.
Do all that.
So I'm saying where you are right now, where you are the source of, and not only the source of the wisdom, you are the target. Like, I want to ask you all the questions. I want to talk to you about the things that are most important to me, even if you don't care. I want to feed those things to you. Yeah. And so, acknowledging that sometimes that can be overwhelming or exhausting, maybe even irritating. If your kids were like, I don't want to talk to daddy anymore. I don't want to ask him.
Yeah.
What would your reaction to that be?
I mean, it's that I can like feel the pain
That's what I'm saying.
already sitting right here at the base of my heart, base of my chest. Well, because like right now, because I've got an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old, almost 2-year-old. And like Morgan and I are the only wellspring of knowledge, and anything that they want to know about the world, they're going to ask us. Yeah. And they'll ask other people and stuff too.
Which is fun because you can even make up stuff that may not even be real. And they're like, okay.
Well, they ask,
anyway, go ahead.
They just, crazy questions of like, who owns this place? Probably Bill Gates. All right, well, let's keep going. And just like, that's it. You just feed them something. Yeah. But for them to be able to, there's the control of me being able to say like, this is the way that the world works, and these are the way that things happen. And sometimes it's fun for me to be able to do that and to see that they're curious and everything. But for them to, I can just see it now, for them to be like, I don't see the value in me asking the question in the first place. Number one, because Brandon has displayed that he doesn't really care about my questions, so I'm not going to ask them anyway. And then, God, please, I hope that doesn't happen. Yeah. That's my prayer right now. God, here's this meaningful prayer. But then to be like, what happened to this relationship? What happened to this relationship that you felt like you could come up to me for anything? And right now we're trying to foster some independence with our 5-year-old in particular, of like, you can do some things on your own, because right now he's like, the way that I operate in all things that happens, I include mom and dad. Mm-hmm. And I can't even, I feel like I can accomplish a task without mom and dad. And I do want independence ultimately for each of them to be able to go and make their own decisions and stuff too. But the heart behind all of that, I hope that they never lose. The heart behind of, man, you know what? Any question that I have, I'm going to come up to my mom and dad. Mm-hmm. Any heartbreak that I have, any really intense thing that's going on, the first thing that I think about is I'm going to call mom and dad. And that's, I think, the relationship that God desires from us too, of like, it's a default of no matter what happens, good or bad or anything, because he desires, like you said in Acts chapter 17, because he desires to have us reach out and to find him, that he desires that heart from us too, of that anything that happens, the stupid and almost meaningless and boring lives that we have and the prayers that we could have, he's like, I don't think they're stupid. I don't think they're meaningless. I don't think, because you are reaching out to me, mm-hmm. and I'll meet you right there.
Yeah.
If you draw, that's what James says in James chapter 4, is that if we draw near to God, he draws near to us. So anytime that that my kids come to me, this is like a personal conviction on my part of like, whenever they come up to me, I'm going to meet you right where you're at. Mm-hmm. And something, and I feel like I'm dominating the conversation. I apologize because you asked me that question. There's this quote that I heard from John Bevere, I can't remember exactly, but he was commenting on that verse. And he was like, so who does the initiating in that verse? Whenever you draw near to God, he draws near to you. Well, that's us taking the initiative. Mm-hmm. And then something about us taking the initiative, whenever my kids come to me, that causes me to draw near to them. Whenever I take the initiative to come close to God, the maker of the universe, who shouldn't care about my problems, but who does intimately care about my problems and thinks about me more than the sands of the seashore. He comes close to me. And the fact that we've got that kind of power, that if we're reaching out to God and he reaches out to us and hopefully find us and grab us, I hope that we don't lose that. So to answer your question more fully, I'd be so sad if my kids stopped reaching out to me.
Because it's about that connection. It's about relationship. And even prayer itself is not, I think it's unhealthy, spiritually unhealthy, and emotionally unhealthy for us to treat God like Santa Claus, or to give him our grocery list of just, here's all the things I want and you can just check those things off for me. I don't think that's what it's about. It's about a relationship. And sometimes there are things that I need, that I can ask somebody for, that I'm in a friendship with, or ask my wife or whatever. And they're going to try to do those things because we're in that relationship. Mm-hmm. But if all that I ever do is just tell you all the things that I want, like, that's not much of a relationship, That's a genie. It's a genie in a bottle. It's customer service.
Yep.
There's no relationship there. So, and that's why I want to make the distinction, is even as we're talking about prayer, does God actually listen? Absolutely. And he listens to the things that we want and that we're asking for. But also, this is what's mind-boggling to me, is like God knows everything, right? God knows all of our thoughts. He knows our hearts. He knows things that are going to happen before they happen. So why would that God want to hear me talk about my day and hear me talk about the things that I'm frustrated with? God, here's what happened today. There's part of me sometimes that I think I've felt this way, or I know for sure I'm tempted to think this way. Like, okay, if you already know this, I'm not going to bother you with something that you already know. I'm not going to tell you something that you're already aware of. And I even had, I was in a discussion one time with just a bunch of different guys just about prayer. And there was one particular guy that was like, it's almost self-centered and arrogant on my part to, like, here, God, let me tell you about my life. And I know he was trying to say, our prayer life should be more about just praise and worship and just like, God, you are awesome. And I think that needs to happen. Mm-hmm. I'm not being dismissive of that at all. But at the same time, I from a parenting perspective, I don't ever want to get to the point where my kids don't want to tell, even, they're in their 20s, where they don't want to tell me about their day or something they're struggling with, even if I already know it.
Yeah.
I mean, when they were younger, like there were things that I knew that happened at school or at practice. I was watching practice sometimes. I know exactly what happened, but we're going to talk about it on the way home because it's on their minds. It's important to them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to treat it that way. And I think that's the way God is too. Like, because it's a relationship. Please tell me what's on your heart. I already know, but I'm not going to not listen.
Because it's not dismissive.
I'm concerned. Like, let's talk. Let's be in this connection. Let's be in relationship with each other. And I think that's something that is so amazing about God, that he has that much concern about each one of us. And I think, I don't want to go so far as to say I know exactly the mind of God, but just from my perspective, for like, if it was me, how heartbreaking it would be for me, for any of my kids, whether they're your kids' age or the age my kids are now, to get to the point where like, yeah, I don't have time, or it's a waste, to feel like it's a waste to come talk to me, or that I've got other stuff going on that I just don't care, or I wouldn't get it, or whatever.
Yeah.
And yet I recognize that's probably how I treat God sometimes. Yeah. And like, and the reality is he wants me to talk to him. Yes, he cares. Yes, he's listening. Yeah. Yes, he can answer. Does he always? No. Does he always answer the way I want him to? No. But that doesn't dismiss the fact that he wants me to have a regular conversation with him, simply because he cares about me that much.
I think that's where we should end today. There's a verse in 1 Peter chapter 5, and it's so simple, but it's so good. It's him just saying, listen, cast all your cares, all of your anxiousness, all of your worries, cast all those things on me. Why? Because I care about you. Yeah. And that's why. Yeah. Because I care about you. And you're like, yeah, but you already know. He's like, yeah, tell me those things. Yeah. That's why, man, I mean, I think that, we're going to talk about this in later podcasts, that Christians, I think it's cool for Christians to have a therapist and to have a relationship with God. Like you can have both those things at the same time.
Yeah, it's okay.
And that's what you do in therapy and counseling, is that you let it all go. You let it all out. And what's interesting is that the therapist is there to listen and to offer some things. A lot of times the therapist is, let me be a sounding board. I'm going to listen to all of it. And God's kind of the same way, is like, listen, you need to tell somebody. So tell somebody. And that's what he says in scripture too, is like, hey, whenever we confess our sins to one another, if I confess my sins to you, healing happens. And whenever I cast my cares to God, whenever I confess my sins to God too, he forgives those things. And he is able to do something about those things. Yeah. With his forgiveness. Yeah. And that kind of a relationship, I don't want to walk away from those kinds of relationships.
Yeah, you hold on to that as much as you can. So,
so we believe that God does care about us.
Absolutely.
And that he cares about our mundane lives, and that he listens to us.
Right. So we're going to talk next time some more about this prayer relationship and this conversation with God that we can have. But let's, for sure know today, there is a God who deeply cares and wants to listen and wants to hear from us.
Cool. Next week we'll continue the discussion. Next couple weeks. Thank y'all.